For generations, families in Appalachia told the same stories. A Cherokee princess grandmother, pure Scots-Irish blood, Black Dutch heritage. But when DNA testing arrived, something happened that nobody expected. The researcher who led the largest DNA study of these families said, "It surprised me so much when mine came up African that I had it done again." Then a third time. They were all the same. 800,000 Americans checked the box for Cherokee ancestry on the census, yet fewer than 330,000 are actually enrolled in a federally recognized Cherokee tribe. The difference is not just a matter of paperwork, it's a living echo of stories passed down in kitchens, at family reunions, and through handwritten notes tucked into Bibles. For generations, the tale of a Cherokee princess ancestor has been told and retold across the Appalachian hills, woven into the fabric of family identity. Folklorists began calling it the Cherokee Princess Syndrome as early as 1994, recognizing how widespread and deeply rooted this narrative had become, especially in places where official records were scarce or lost. The numbers reveal a gap between belief and documentation, but they also point to something more, a longing for belonging, for a sense of pride and specialness in a world that often demanded proof. As Indigenous scholar Kim Tallbear reminds us, DNA cannot define tribal citizenship or erase the cultural meaning of these stories. The myth's reach, measured in hundreds of thousands, shows just how powerful and persistent family lore can be, even when the evidence tells another story. A single entry in the 1798 county records hints at a puzzle that would haunt Appalachian genealogy for centuries. The word Melungeon appears in court documents from the Tennessee-Virginia borderlands, describing a family whose origins no one could quite explain. These early Melungeons settled in remote hollows of Hancock and Lee counties, forming tight-knit communities along the ridges and creeks where census takers struggled to categorize them. Some neighbors called them Portuguese, others said Turkish, and many simply whispered about their dark hair and olive skin. Historian Henry Louis Gates Jr. once remarked, "The Melungeons are the mystery people of Appalachia." Their story is woven from fragments, land deeds, church rolls, and family Bibles, yet for generations the truth remained just out of reach. Jack Goins, a lifelong resident of Sneedville, grew up surrounded by these stories. He spent years combing through courthouse archives, determined to trace his own line back beyond the labels and rumors. What he found challenged everything he thought he knew about his heritage, and set the stage for a scientific reckoning that would ripple far beyond his own family tree. In 2012, a team led by Dr. Sophia Miller set out to answer the question that had haunted Appalachian genealogists for decades. Who really were the ancestors behind the Melungeon and Black Dutch stories? The results landed with the force of a revelation. Testing 112 families from the Tennessee-Virginia border, the study found that 99.5% of the paternal Y DNA lineages belonged to haplogroup E1b1a, an unmistakable marker for sub-Saharan African ancestry. Autosomal DNA told a story just as complex. The average admixture came out to 45% African, 40% European, and 15% Native American. Dr. Miller, a geneticist who grew up hearing her own family's tales of Portuguese great-grandmothers, described the findings as a mirror held up to the myths of the mountains. The numbers left little room for doubt. While family Bibles and oral tradition had favored stories of Cherokee princesses or lost Portuguese sailors, the genetic evidence pointed to a different origin, a history shaped by African men and European women whose descendants survived by weaving protective legends. For many, the shock of those numbers was both a loss and a kind of freedom. The data cracked open the door to a deeper, more honest understanding of Appalachian roots and raised a new question. What forces in history made these families need such myths in the first place? On the Appalachian frontier, the rules of ancestry were written in courthouse ledgers and enforced by the sharp edge of the law. In the late 1700s, more than 23,000 indentured men, many of African descent, entered the mountains alongside a smaller number of European women. Their unions, often shaped by necessity and survival rather than social approval, left a genetic pattern that still puzzles their descendants. The Virginia Racial Integrity Act of 1924 drew a hard line, demanding a racial pedigree for every birth and marriage. Families who didn't fit the binary, white or colored, found themselves at risk of losing property, inheritance, and even their legal marriages. Inheritance cases could hinge on a single story. In 1874, Martha Zimmerman stood in a Hawkins County courtroom fighting to inherit her late husband's land. The court faced a choice: accept the defense's claim that she was colored and deny her the estate, or believe the family legend of a Cherokee ancestor. The legend prevailed, and Zimmerman kept her land. These were not just stories, they were strategies, crafted in response to laws that punished ambiguity. The DNA patterns seen today, with African paternal lines and European maternal lines, echo the realities of a society where survival sometimes depended on the right story told at the right time. In Wise County, Virginia, the phrase Black Dutch began appearing in land deeds as early as 1861, quietly shielding families whose ancestry didn't fit into the strict racial categories demanded by law. The code was more than a curious nickname, it was a lifeline. Families who might have been classified as colored instead filed property claims and marriage records under the ambiguous label, protecting their land and status for future generations. Census records from 1850 and later show how these families slipped between lines, sometimes listed as white, sometimes as mulatto, but always navigating the shifting rules. DNA analysis of descendants tells the story in numbers. About 62% of paternal Y DNA lineages trace to sub-Saharan Africa, while 78% of maternal lines are European. The Black Dutch cover allowed families to hold on to what mattered: home, inheritance, and dignity, at a time when a single word on a deed could mean the difference between belonging and exclusion. The evidence in these old records reveals not just survival, but a careful, creative adaptation to a world that forced people to hide parts of themselves to protect the rest. Dr. Miriam Levy remembers the moment she opened the lab results from the Melungeon DNA project and saw something she never expected. 4 out of 92 men carried the Kohanim modal haplotype, a genetic signature most often found among Jewish priests. In the general American population, fewer than 2 in 1,000 men have this marker. Yet here, in families long told they were either Portuguese or Black Dutch, the percentage was 20 times higher than the national average. Rachel Sullivan, whose grandfather was one of the 4, grew up hearing stories about a Portuguese ancestor named Pedro Zimmerman. But church records from 1881 list Pedro as both Portuguese and, curiously, as a man of Levitical descent. For Rachel, the DNA didn't just rewrite her family's story, it added a layer of wonder. The Kohanim marker, so rare outside Jewish communities, points to a hidden thread woven through generations of migration, secrecy, and survival. Instead of a simple black or white divide, the genetic evidence reveals a tapestry that stretches from the hills of Appalachia all the way to the ancient Middle East. The discovery left Dr. Levy and families like Rachel's with more questions than answers, but also a sense that their roots are even deeper and more intricate than anyone imagined. The truth carried a price, sometimes measured in heartbreak, sometimes in lost inheritance. In 1932, a marriage in Wise County was annulled after the county registrar traced the groom's line to an enslaved ancestor, despite generations of Black Dutch stories. The court's decision left the couple's children without legal status and their mother without protection. Dr. Lena Harvey, a a psychologist who has worked with dozens of Appalachian families facing DNA surprises, recalls how the shock can ripple through generations. She describes clients who were denied their parents' estates in the 1970s after a distant cousin produced evidence of a non-European ancestor. In at least 15 documented cases, families lost land, homes, or the right to call themselves kin because the law demanded a single answer to the question of race. One family spent 6 months in legal limbo, unable to bury their father or claim his property, while court-appointed genealogists combed through old census records and DNA reports. The emotional toll, confusion, anger, even shame, often lingers long after the legal battles end. Dr. Harvey urges compassion, reminding us that these stories were survival tools, not betrayals. For those facing the fallout, healing begins with understanding the pressures their ancestors faced and the choices they made to keep family together. On a warm September weekend in 1997, more than 150 people gathered in Boone County, West Virginia for the first Melungeon Union. Some arrived with family Bibles, others with DNA reports, all searching for connection and understanding. The event drew descendants from Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, and beyond, people whose families had once hidden behind labels like Black Dutch or Portuguese, now meeting face to face in daylight, no longer in the shadows. Ellen Harper, then president of the Melungeon Heritage Association, welcomed newcomers with a simple message. Your story matters here, no matter what the records say. Surveys taken at the reunion found that 92% of attendees reported feeling a stronger sense of belonging after meeting others with similar histories. The MHA offered a counseling line for those struggling with DNA surprises and handed out resource packets on how to talk with family about unexpected results. For many, the weekend was a turning point. Instead of shame, there was laughter, shared recipes, and the joyful swapping of old photographs. As Harper later reflected, we are not defined by the stories we had to tell to survive, but by the courage it takes to claim the whole truth together. Today, DNA testing reminds us that every family story is a mosaic, woven for survival, not deception. As science uncovers forgotten roots, the real inheritance is resilience. In Appalachia and beyond, embracing complexity turns old shame into new pride. After all, every lineage holds more than meets the eye.